Hey Podheads, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking that subscribe and like below. I'm your host Starbuck, aka the Prince of Dorkness, and today we're going to talk about the Squadron Supreme Omnibus from Marvel Comics. This thing's currently out of print. We're going to talk about why you should want to read it and how we as a community can get this thing back in print. So stick around, let's talk comics. Hey Podheads, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Starbuck, aka the Prince of Dorkness, and today we're going to talk about the Squadron Supreme Omnibus from Marvel Comics. As of today, we have 29 subscribers. I want to thank all 29 of you. Make sure that if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It helps the algorithm a lot. And please comment below because I want to interact with my audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, the first thing we're going to talk about with the Squadron Supreme Omnibus, and I'll do some overhead shots here in just a little bit, but I want to talk about the writing on this book. This book was written by Mark Gruenwald. This omnibus is currently out of print, and it absolutely should not be. And so we're going to talk to you at the end of the video about how we can get this thing printed again. But in the meantime, Mark Gruenwald's story. This is, I feel like, the most ahead of its time story that I've ever read. I've read this book several times over the years, and as I've read it, with each successive reading, the storylines and the elements and the conflicts in these stories are more and more poignant and modern with every rereading. So if that alone doesn't pique your interest, what this book is you have a group of superheroes that have decided, pardon me, that rather than reacting to superhero or supervillain attacks and whatnot, these superheroes decide that they're going to fight the problem at the source, and they are going to create a utopian environment that doesn't have these elements. They're going to create a land that considers the greater good of the many versus the individual rights of the few. And obviously this storyline is going to come up with a whole lot of moral choices and dilemmas, especially when you consider the fact it's paired with the fact that these are superhuman characters that could dominate man given the desire, but have chosen instead to make a utopia that they think is appropriate for mankind. The biggest conflict that comes from this story, I think, and I think that this comes out more in subsequent readings, is that these characters are so tragically flawed. Our superheroes in this book are basically human characters that are so deeply flawed that they can't always see the forest for the trees. And I mean, you've got issues addressed about toxic masculinity, sexism. It talks about mental health and dealing with grief. It talks about, there's an analogy in the book that I feel like basically correlates to sexual assault to me, although it's not written that way. It's much more family appropriate. But all in all, this book tackles some really intense topics. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to kind of leave you with, I think that this is one of the most important stories you can read in comics. And if you have read it and you say, hey, you know, I can see it being kind of a stepping stone for books like The Boys, you'd be absolutely right. But the thing that I think a lot of people might not recognize is that Jonathan Hickman, during his most recent X-Men run and creating the Krakoan environment and the Krakoan civilization, they are effectively taking so much material from Mark Gruenwald's Squadron Supreme that it's unmistakable when you compare them side by side. So, that being said, this is one of my favorite Marvel omnibuses ever. The artwork is by Bob Hall and Paul Ryan through most of the book. They did all of the Squadron Supreme maxi series. I think they called them back then. It was a 12-issue miniseries. They did all the work, the penciling work for those books. But one thing that was kind of a neat Easter egg for me is that in my last video for the Hunter book from Dark Horse Comics, I had mentioned that I wasn't familiar with Paul Neary's artwork. And in this book, they have a Captain America number 314 that's drawn by Paul Neary, and I had no idea. I've read that book, half a dozen times. And really, it's the difference between the color art and the black and white art. I compared them side by side, and although the similarities are there, the black and white art has kind of a level of detail and scale that seems different than that of the color comics later on in his career. And it's still fantastic. So I wonder how much stuff of Paul Neary's I've actually read and don't even realize it. So I can't wait to go back and do some research on that. But let's talk about how we can get this book back in print. So over on Near Mint Conditions channel, I hate to direct you somewhere else, but it's one of my favorite channels, and everyone should be subscribed to Omar. He's incredible. Over on Near Mint Conditions channel, they're doing a top 10 or top 20 most wanted out of print Marvel omnibuses poll. Now, last year when he did this poll, of the 20 books submitted to Marvel, something like 19 got reprinted. So Marvel's paying attention. Omar clearly has David Gabriel in his back pocket. That's cool. That's awesome. He gets all the stuff early, which is why you should check him out. But clearly they're listening to him. So go over to his channel, watch that video, subscribe to him, like it, and make sure that you vote to get Squadron Supreme back in print so new generations can read it. That's my video. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you hanging out with me today. When all else fails, take a nap. Thanks for watching Prince of Darkness.